Things First is sponsored by Ram Trucks, built to serve.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to First Things First. I'm Jen Wolf. That is Nick Wright. This is Chris Broussard hanging out with us this week and having a good time doing it.
A great week.
It only took 1 week, in fact, only 4 days of the week, for Chris Broussard to deal with what every person who's ever sat in that chair has dealt with, which is Broussard's a little under the weather.
Are you really?
Yeah.
A little bit of a nasal drip.
Responsibility for that.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
That's
I did. I wasn't even sick this week. I was never in aisle 7. Yeah. Yes, I'm really sorry about that. Nope.
I can't scoot anywhere.
But we've loved having you.
It's been great.
Despite
a little bit of
being under the weather. All of that. Hey, it's TGI Friday, which means it is TGI almost the weekend with a great slate of NFL action, playoff berths on the line, and that's where we start this morning. For the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles, their entire season comes down to this weekend. For Philly, couldn't be simpler. If they beat the Giants, no matter what the Cowboys do, they are in. Dallas, on the other hand, they need some help. They need to beat Washington, and then they need to cross their fingers that Philly loses. 2 quarterbacks with a lot to prove this weekend in Dak Prescott and Carson Wentz, and both know exactly what's on the line.
All we can control is what we can control. Focus on this game, winning this game, and if we're fortunate, we'll make the most of it when that time comes.
As leaders and coaches as well have done a great job of just making sure guys are still bought into this, in the here and now, and not dwelling on the past, not looking ahead either, and just going out to work. You know, we got our work cut out for us against a good opponent on the road, and obviously if we win, we're in, so we know what's at stake.
There is a lot at stake for both of these organizations. And, Nick, I'll start with you. Who do you have more confidence in, though, the Eagles or the Cowboys heading into this weekend?
I don't know why anyone would have any level of confidence in Dallas whatsoever. Their season was on the line 5 days ago, and they played offensively one of their worst games of the year. Defensively, they only allowed 17 points, but they allowed Carson Wentz to have one of his most efficient, productive games of the year. A team that had been in Philadelphia turning the ball over throughout the season. The Cowboys were unable to force any turnovers in that football game. So why am I supposed to believe that Dallas, now in week 17, now they flip the switch, now they're a great football team? Philly, on the other hand, we have treated some Philly wins better than we've treated, to me, some Dallas, or worse than we've treated some Dallas losses. Dallas started out 3-0 and looked like an excellent team. Philly started out 1-2 and looked like what the hell's wrong with them. Since then, these two teams have gone in very divergent directions. Philly since then is 7-5. And 4 of those 5 losses are to quality opponents. The one bad, including New England, Seattle, Minnesota. The one bad loss is the one that's glaring to Miami from just now 3 weeks ago, or a month ago, I guess, which then led to the Giants game, which was an ugly win. The Washington game, which was an ugly win, leading into the Dallas game. I believe that Philadelphia has righted itself to a degree over the last month of football by finding ways to beat the Giants in Washington, by dominating the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas, meanwhile, after that 3-0 start, what are they on the year? Oh, so they're 4-8 in their next 12 games. If you go 4-8 over 12 football games, you absolutely could lose to a Washington team that the first time you played them was a 1-touchdown game going into the 4th quarter against this same quarterback, by the way, Case Keenum, who in that game had a 105 quarterback rating, played well and played relatively well, so to speak. And so I have far more confidence in Philadelphia this weekend against the Giants than Dallas against Washington.
I actually have more confidence in Dallas. And I'm going to tell you why. I think one thing we can agree on is that Dallas is the more talented team, especially with Philadelphia with the injuries. Okay, so they're the most talented team. Secondly, Dak Prescott, last week, obviously he was injured, and you saw it in some of his passes. And I think he learned from that experience. I think this week, we know he's not really throwing the ball in practice this week, but I think having played last week through the injury is going to help him play through it this week. And I think he'll be smarter. I think he'll make better throws. I think he'll make better decisions, knowing how to play with that injury. So I think those are 2 factors in the Cowboys' favor. Also, Amari Cooper. He did not show up last week. He did not show up against New England. And now there's talk about, is he even a gamer? You know, people are wondering that, and not just from this year, but even looking at some of the past, and he wants that big contract. So I think he knows he has to show up and play well. And then you mentioned Washington. What is Washington playing for? They don't, it's not like they have Dwayne Haskins playing, and you got the young quarterback who, you know, season's over, but we want him to look good. He wants to do his best. Right. I'm not even sure they want to win. It's best if they lose for their draft position. So those factors combined, it's not like I expect Dallas to necessarily come out and be the team we've all thought they could be going into the season. But I think they'll play well, and I think Washington has nothing to play for. On the other side, I think the Giants, even though their season's over too, you do have the young quarterback, and every time he's out there, Daniel Jones, you want him to play well. Pat Shurmur.
It's coaching for his job, man.
Right, okay, yeah, that's the thing. Is his job on the line? I think some of these players, now reportedly, you see the quotes, granted, they're saying what they need to say, but I think they like him, and certainly Jones. Jones looks at Pat Shurmur like, this is the guy that drafted me, this is the guy that gave me the starting position over a legend 3 games into the season. So he probably wants Shurmur to stay rather than have to learn a whole new system under a new staff. So I just think that the Giants, not to mention, they almost beat the Eagles a few weeks ago. So I think that the Giants have a good chance of beating the Eagles, and I'm certain Dallas will beat Washington.
So let's focus on these two guys. Who do you trust more between them? Dak, who's clearly suffered with his shoulder injury, even though he says he's fine. He's not practicing during the week. Or Carson Wentz, who only in the last 3 weeks against mediocre teams has sort of come into 2017 Carson Wentz. Who do you trust more? It's going to take the organization on their back, head into this weekend and win a game.
Well, I absolutely trust Carson Wentz more. And Dak's shoulder injury does not explain the last 5 weeks of football. It might explain last week of football where Dak wasn't terrible, and I don't want to act like he was terrible, but obviously the Cowboys didn't score a touchdown. But Dak's first 10 weeks, the team was 6-4. He had 21 touchdowns, 9 picks, a 104 rating, and was averaging 320 yards passing per game. He was not an MVP frontrunner, but on that second tier of MVP candidates after those first 10 weeks. And if the team's record was better, he probably would have been a top 3 MVP candidate. The last 5 weeks, they're 1-4. He's averaging fewer than 300 yards passing per game. He has 5 touchdowns, 2 picks, and his passer rating has dropped to 85. That is not all because he played 1 game with a bad shoulder. It is because in the most critical stretch of their season, when their schedule got the toughest, Dak played his worst football. Carson, on the other hand, now their schedule has softened up at the end of the year, granted, but in their most critical stretch of the season, he was damn near perfect in the fourth quarter against the Giants. Same thing in the fourth quarter against Washington. Those 2 fourth quarters and overtime combined for 4 touchdowns, I believe. And then in the Cowboys game, as I mentioned, I believe, played his best game of the year. And even that Dolphins game prior to it can't be put on Wentz's shoulders because they scored plenty of points in that game. That was a defensive meltdown against Ryan Fitzpatrick and the Dolphins. So I have far more confidence in Carson. And one other point, Chris, I'm curious what you think of this. Dak has played this whole year without a contract. Now you are this close to the finish line of, as long as I don't suffer a significant injury, I'm getting over $130 million. We just don't, we're gonna argue about the spread. How much does that creep into his mind as far as if he does need to run the ball for a first down, if he does want to get rid of the ball early, when he's been rolling these, you know, he's been spinning this roulette wheel, so to speak, repeatedly this year, and now he's got 1 more spin left before he could possibly lose. I wonder if that affects how he plays this week.
I don't think that'll be any different because it's been that way all year. What if he got injured badly in game 7?
Sure.
You know, it would have been the same thing. So I don't think he's worried about that. I do think, again, I always talk about his intangibles, his leadership. I do think he'll come out and play the typical game he's been playing. Now, that does have to be better than he's played the last 5 weeks. And Carson has been better over the last month. There's no doubt about it. And maybe you do have more faith in him playing a better game than Dak. Here's the thing. Carson has to be great. When you look at his supporting cast of receivers, Zach Ertz, his favorite target, may not be there. The running game, you know, they've run the ball well.
The Eagles' defense over the totality of the season has not been great.
Right. So he has to be spectacular for them to win, even though it's just the Giants. Whereas Dak, with Ezekiel Elliott, You know, Tony Pollard has his moments. You know, the receiving core, the defense. I just think he doesn't have to be great for them to win, whereas Wentz certainly has to be great with them to win with the injuries.
All right, Brian Westbrook is going to stop by. We will discuss what this weekend means for both of these teams coming up. On the other side, though, has Baker Mayfield finally been humbled? Hear from him next on FS1. You can always check us out on the Fox Sports channel. It's on SiriusXM, and we'll be right back.